Our next speaker is Mr. MATSOBANE MATLWA. MATSOBANE MATLWA is the CEO of the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants. His previous life, he was the group executive, large business with SARS. He was previously a GM within ABSA, and before that he was an audit partner at Ernst & Young. And he has spent time as a senior executive at various other entities like Transnet and CETA. Mr. Matla is going to be talking about the transformation of the accounting profession locally and internationally. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Matla to the podium.
Good afternoon. I believe it's now afternoon. I need to figure out how to work this thing first. No? The guy didn't show me.
Let's see.
Oh, yeah. Take it back. Yeah. Thanks, Victor Sekes, Program Director. I'm in a very difficult position because if you look at my topic, it's slightly different to what you guys have been talking about. Emphasis has been on audit committees, the role, the effectiveness. Mine is looking at transformation, and I think there's a link. And the link is that as audit committees operate, they also need to transform. The question becomes, where do these people come from that need to serve in audit committees? My mandate today is to talk about the accounting profession, but as you'll appreciate, the accounting profession is huge. I'm told that in South Africa we have plus minus about 28 accounting bodies. So the perspective I'm going to give is from SAICA, which is for mainly chartered accountants. I will cover, when I speak about international, some of the things happening that are not necessarily chartered accountant. What is it that I'm hoping to achieve by the end of this presentation? Is to really show you that the transformation profession needs all of us. And the transformation profession is not going at the pace that we would love it to be. Also, I will try to show that there are major constraints, stumbling blocks, and challenges in trying to transform the profession. And also what SAICA is trying to do in addressing some of the challenges that are within SAICA's control. And lastly, to try and say to you, what is it that you are doing in your own area to transform your own profession? If it's an accounting, we'll appreciate. Transformation has different meanings to different people. But if you look at the Oxford Dictionary, it talks about a marked change in form, nature, or appearance. In South Africa in particular, we've chosen to emphasize on transforming in terms of changing the complexity of our profession. We traditionally look at how do we change the demographics of the accounting profession. SAICA in particular focuses on ensuring that the chartered accountants of tomorrow, the future, reflects the demographics of South Africa. And we've taken a route to focus predominantly on African and Coloureds, mainly because those numbers are highly underrepresented. And you'll see as I start and unpack that it's a problem that has happened for quite some time. Where are we currently? What are the numbers that we have in the system? If you look at Africans in South Africa, we are told they represent 79% of the people in the country. But in the accounting profession, there's only 7% of Africans in the profession. If you look at white people, they represent 9% of the South African population, but they have an 80% representation as chartered accountants in this country. If you look at Asian, they are 3% of the country, But if you look at the population of SAICA, they are 10%. Colors, they are 9% in the country, there's only 3%. Those numbers are worrying for anybody who's passionate about transformation of the profession. The question becomes, where do you start? And one needs to understand what is the cause of this situation that we find ourselves. There's many stories, many explanations, and you can choose any point to try and explain, but it's always very difficult. Where have we come from? I could have chosen 2001 or 1998 or 1976. For simplicity, I've chosen 2004 and tried to compare to 2012. It clearly shows that if you look into 2004, that there was 90% of the CAs were white, 2% were African, 6% were Asian, and 2% were colored. As I speak now, 80% still white, Africans 7%, Asian 10%. If you look at the African numbers, there's been a growth of 5%. The question that we need to ask ourselves and say, why is the growth so minute, very small? And I'm sure you can speculate for many, many reasons. We can look at how many CAs are produced by SAICA. We can look at how many graduates are graduating universities. We can look at the home environment and try and understand that, do we prepare our children to be able to focus and take education as a priority? Do we look at the country and say, as a country, does it make it easier for us to be able to study? So you can choose any of those factors. Rightly or wrongly, I've tried to look at something that all of us are very familiar, to look at the educational system that we have currently in the country. And I've taken the stats for 2011, and I said, let's try and unpack it and understand how many of those people have managed to pass, because those are the students that end up being chartered accountants and internal auditors and forensic accountants and all those other accountants that we have in the country. If you take 2001, we are told that there were about, give and take, 500,000 students that rose, or learners, because they're still learners at that level. Now, 70% of them passed. And remember, pass means that you have met the requirements, not necessarily the university entrance requirement. It means that we have passed. During my time when I wrote matric many, many years ago, we used to call it school leaving certificate. Some people used to get an exemption. Now, 70% of 500,000 people have actually passed. You can do the maths. However, 46% of those people have written maths, and during my time, it was standard maths, higher grade maths. Today, we talk about core maths and non-core maths, or maths literacy. And if you look at that number, 24% of those people passed have what I regard as an exemption, meaning with a pass to qualify to go to a university. If you take it further and say, out of the 24% pass, how many of them has done core maths? 18%, if you like, make it 19%. Now, if we had the data that help us to unpack it even further and say, out of those 18%, 19% that qualifies to go to university, how many of them are Africans? How many of them are coloreds? How many of them are Asians? How many of them are white? From what we see on the TV, I'm sure you can make it, you can guess. To me, that is the first problem that we have for any profession, whether it's chartered accountants, lawyers, engineers, doctors. Until and unless we find a solution to address this picture that is worrying, we are in a dire strait. We can blame everybody. The numbers are very clear that the educational system that we have needs to be overhauled, or the culture in our homes need to change, or the role models need to do what they're not doing currently. Because this picture is not something that we can be proud of. Now, it's well and good for us to look at the problems and become sad about what is it we're trying to do. But we always have to take responsibility as citizens of this country, as individuals, as institutes, as human beings, to say, what can we do? And it will never be enough. Doesn't matter what we do, because the backlog that you deal with is so heavy and is deep that it needs multi-approach. It needs each and every one of you and your families to get involved in this journey. It's going to be tough for some time to come. I sometimes feel bad as a chartered accountant, and I ask myself, how did I cope? Why was I selfish? Shouldn't I have done better? So I'm not sure the CAs in the audience, how do they feel when they look at those stats, especially the African CAs with the background they come from. So what the cycle is doing currently is to look at initiatives to try and address this problem. Now I need to emphasize that we're not winning the game, because we don't just have the resources. What we've done recently, last year we accredited University in Limpopo. Because one of the challenges that we have in this country is that if the universities that are attended by predominantly black people and they're not accredited to give a CA qualification, and the few students that manage to go to VETS, UCT, UJ, you will never address the challenge that we're facing. So we need to look into the system and say, where are the stumbling blocks? Where are the bottlenecks? And part of the bottlenecks is the universities that are predominantly producing black graduates are not accredited. And that is one of the problems. And we now, fortunately, managed to accredit University Limpopo with the help of University of Johannesburg. At the time, it was called a capacity building program, and we'll appreciate, because of where we come from, the university of historically disadvantaged didn't have the resources to be able to employ qualified people to be able to produce the kind of results we want.